and be one nature. So to help, I want to ask this question. Biologically, how is a human different from other creatures? And I made a point of putting some other creatures on here of which are quite different from us, all the way from worms to fish to birds to other mammals. What distinguishes us biologically? And we can come up with different descriptions, but when we get right down to it, the distinction is what? DNA. That is what distinguishes, because human DNA is different from all other DNA. A lion's DNA is different from a tiger's DNA, and we keep right on going through the animal kingdom, the mammal kingdom, and continue on down. The DNA is different. That's what makes a human is our unique DNA. But even with our DNA, all the DNA of humans, even though it has a certain pattern to be human DNA, yet it's still distinct, and that's why everyone looks different, acts different. However, in conception, something can occur that can make our DNA nearly alike, almost 100% identical. I want to compare a normal conception to something that happens 3 out of 1,000 times. On the top figure, the male sperm will unite with the female egg, and the chromosomes of the one will combine with the chromosomes of the other and create what's called a diploid cell. And as that multiplies, it becomes what's called a blastocyst. I may not pronounce that exactly correct, but a blastocyst. And in between the first diploid cell, which is called a zygote, and it becomes a blastocyst, that's when the stem cells form, then the blastocyst, and then we begin to form the different portions of the human body. 3 out of 1,000 times, this is not how it will work. What will happen instead, after the diploid cell, after the zygote is formed, it will split into 2 blastocytes. Now, some places I've read this happens from the cell and then it splits. Others will say the blastocyte will form, then the blastocyte will split. How exactly it occurs, I don't know. Obviously, I don't have the information on that. What happens when the zygote was split or the blastocyst was split into 2? We have identical twins. And when the blastocyte splits 3 times, which only occurs 1 out of 1.5 million times, identical triplets occur. I wish to look at what are the features of the DNA of what's called identical zygotes or monozygotes. First of all, I've read in some places it's 100% actually in the split, but then immediately afterward, something will happen which is called epigenetic modification. These are minor gene differences, and in a way it's like the environment coming upon a gene. That's why it says epi, which means upon the gene. The environment will affect the genes, and different ones will be turned on and turned off. Best way to say it. And then after the birth occurs, the environment will continue to work upon the 2 individuals. And as identical twins get older, more differences can be seen in them. And these differences is not because their genes have changed, they're the same, but because different ones are turned on and turned off by this epigenetic modification. One very common question that occurs, are the fingerprints the same for identical twins? And the answer is no, they're never the same. They're different because different environmental factors will affect the shaping of the fingerprints. It's environmental factors that are making small, minor changes. There was a study that began at the University of Minnesota called the Minnesota Twins Project, in which identical twins were brought together who were separated at birth. Now, there's much more detail in the essays. I only want to mention one set of twins here called the Gem twins. They were separated when they were 1 month old. Didn't know the other one even existed. They both lived in Ohio and wasn't very far apart. I can't remember the distance. And the effort of this bringing twins together occurred, and these 2 men met each other for the first time when they were 39 years old. And then as they were studied, one item after another matched in their behavior and their preferences. Even that bench you see built around that tree in the backyard, the other brother, the other identical twin had built the very same one in his backyard. Let's look at some other similarities. Both had been married twice. The first wife of each one had the same first name. The second wife of each of the twins had the same first name. One was Linda, one was Betty. I can't recall which is which. Each had a son. One named his son and spelled it James Allen, as you see, and the other was James Allen. Each built the bench in the backyard, as you see in the picture. They drove the same color and type of car. They smoked the same brand of cigarettes. They drank the same brand of beer. Amazingly, not knowing each other, they visited the same city in Florida on vacation. Now, with most odds, it will vary anywhere from 80 to 85%. The twins will be the same who have been separated from birth. The Jim twins were higher. Now, of course, someone will look at this and say, wait a minute, are you telling me there is a gene that spells out what kind of car and what kind of cigarette? We have predispositions. We have things as soon as we taste it, as soon as we see it, as soon as we hear it, we like it. We've all experienced that. We will hear music, and since we hear that music, oh, I really like that, whatever it may be. There may be a fragrance. As soon as it is sensed, a person will respond to it. Where do these predispositions come from? Well, certainly one source is genes, and if it's not genes, it's something that the identical twins have that carried over like this. It's just absolutely amazing. Now, I have brought up this feature in the Jim twins, and there are other interesting ones to read about. All you need to do is do a search on Minnesota Twins Project, and you can find others. There's one set of identical twins separated. One was raised by a Jewish family, and the other was raised, and he was in Hitler's youth. And you can go online and read about that yourself. It's very, very fascinating similarities. And, of course, the similarities indicate that much of our behavior, not all of it, because of epigenetic modification, the social life that a person's brought up in. These are brought up by different parents in different areas, so they had differences. But there were others that were so amazing. And the question comes up, if they had had identical genes turned on and turned off, the epigenetic modification didn't occur, how much more would they have been like? If their environment had been exactly the same, how much would they have been alike? And I want to take that principle and use it as my analogy for the Trinity. I want to look at the human race, and I want to look at God, or I can say the God race, if I want to call it that. I prefer just the word God. I think we are in agreement there's one human race. Amongst it, all kinds of differences amongst us, but one human race. There is one God race. I said that earlier. Call him the Godhead. If you look at the Westminster Confession of Faith, Godhead is the term that's used. Sometimes when we say God, we use it as a name. Oh, God, answer my prayer. Sometimes when we say God, we're talking about the being of God. God created the heavens and the earth. God is the Almighty. That sort of use of God. Now, what makes a human physically is the DNA. That's what makes them human. The word substance, it may be called God's substance, the substance of God, the very same nature of God, very same nature of the Father, as that was used in the Nicene Creed. In my essay, I use the term God stuff. There is something spiritually that distinguishes God from the angels. Whatever that difference is, that substance, not atoms. I mean, God is non-material. He's spirit. Whatever distinguished God as a spirit from other spirits, the God substance, the homoousia that we saw earlier, that is what I have termed spiritual DNA. The spiritual DNA is what makes God unique. With humans, the more similar the DNA, the more similar the persons.